quite true, I think, that we learn probably 90% of the way that we need to parent from our own parents. We look back for examples that we either go, oh, I'm going to do that, that's really valuable, I'm going to adopt that as the way that I'm going to do my parenting, but sometimes we look back and say, I'll never parent like that when it's my turn, and sometimes we live up to that expectation that we set ourselves. Sometimes we fall a little bit short, and that's okay. If I were to look back on my parents, and my dad in particular, about what he did as a parent that I think made him a successful parent, I think it was that he was incredibly involved. So Dad was fabulous at never missing a parent-teacher interview, at never missing a sporting event that I was at. If it was important to me, then Dad was involved. And later on in life, I asked Dad, what his approach to parenting was when I became a parent. And he just said, always be there. Just try to always be there as best as you possibly can. Just get involved. And I realised that all of those examples that were present in my life across a full lifetime always had Dad there just off to the side. He was always involved. Now, I think that one of the pitfalls of thinking about involvement as a parent is that we either think that we are or we aren't. And I actually want us to stop and think about involvement as being more of a range. It's possible to be involved to varying degrees. And so provided we are involved, then I would suggest that we're stepping up to our commitments as parents in a really productive and meaningful way. Could I suggest to you that there are 4 stages of involvement for parents in terms of connecting with your school? I think number 1 is a formal involvement, and that means that you've stepped up to be, for instance, on a school council or a school board. It's an important thing to do, to actually step onto the same page as the school as making strong strategic decisions, and I commend anybody who's prepared to make that sort of formal commitment to their school. They are important and critical people in your school's ambitions to fulfil its strategic targets. Thank you if you're that kind of parent, if you're doing something really fabulous. But not everyone can make that commitment. So what I want to suggest, instead of making no commitment as a result of that, instead of having no involvement, let's step back a bit from formality and think a little bit about what would it be to be semi-formal in our involvement. So I would suggest the semi-formal commitments that we make are those that are regular but not quite as formal as those as meeting with the rest of the school council members. So it's things like volunteering to be a part of your canteen every Monday. It might be to come in and listen to a little bit of student reading. It might be involved in the school crossing, or it could even be involved in committing to coaching the senior school football team. Whatever it is, it could be something that you do regularly, so there's a formality to it, there's a schedule to it, but it's not quite as big a commitment as stepping up to being on school council. Then what if we were to step below that? How could we go a little further for people who still have struggled with the time to do that, who have incredibly busy lives, but still would like to be involved in some way? I think that schools are better than ever now at being able to offer what I would call semi-informal ways for you to be involved. Those examples of these would be not regular commitments, but they're commitments nonetheless, and they're commitments that you seize when you see the opportunity. For instance, it might be to volunteer to go on a school camp, or it might be volunteering to be a helper at a parent excursion. It could be that you've decided to make sure that you arrive at one of those working bees that are scheduled, that we try to pretend sometimes weren't in the newsletter. But it's making a commitment that my ability to step in and to be involved with the school is at a semi-informal level, and then below that is the informal. And I think sometimes we forget that there are so many opportunities for us as parents, if we're prepared to look for them, to be informally involved in our kids' school lives, and indeed in partnering with the school to try and improve and get better all the time. They include things like popping in occasionally just to say hello to your child's teacher, sending a note from home to thank them, or indeed perhaps encouraging your child to do a little bit of the thanking and acknowledging of the hard work that they do. It's a small thing, but for most teachers that I speak to, that's a big impact. It's so lovely for a teacher to just occasionally have a parent and or a student who will come along and say, you know what, we don't have anything major that we want to talk to you about today, other than to say, thanks for all the hard work you're doing, we really appreciate it. I think the more parents think about being involved at the level that they can manage, and less about being either involved or not involved, then the more I think that schools and parents can get onto the same page and do some truly fantastic stuff together.